warm weather, and it's heading into high tourism season. South Walton County has seen an increase in rental property occupancy.
And News Channel 7's Leticia Vaselli rode along with a Walton County Sheriff's deputy for an update on spring break vacation rentals.
Spring break brings tourists and large crowds to South Walton, but it can also bring trouble.
We've obviously had a lot of issues with traffic crashes, and we've even had a couple pedestrian crashes here lately that are probably of concern, along with our noise complaints and some unruly juveniles.
On March 11th, a group of underage spring breakers were evicted from a rental in Miramar Beach, and a 19-year-old was arrested for throwing bottles off a balcony. 4 days later, another underage group was evicted from a rental in Miramar. A 19-year-old college student was arrested for open house party and possession of alcohol.
Our role was initially identifying the issue and identifying the criminal complaint that went along with it, notifying the rental companies that we've partnered with to assist us in getting these parties under control, and then the rental companies, they come out and deal with it from there, and we just stand by to ensure the peace from that point.
The Walton County Sheriff's Office has partnered with vacation rental companies to keep the trouble under control, but they cannot evict renters.
It becomes illegal when we begin to get noise complaints, people destroying the houses, littering, things of that nature, and it becomes a criminal issue at that point. And house parties, as it becomes to who's responsible for the residents and things like that.
The Sheriff's Office will continue to patrol along the beach areas looking for those wanting to cause trouble. In Walton County, Leticia Vaselli, News Channel 7.
Deputy Rowe with the Walton County Sheriff's Office says home checks are always an option for property owners concerned about their rental, and that if you see or hear trouble, reach out to the Sheriff's Office.
The Sheriff's Office says they want families and individuals to come to Walton County, but not bring chaos with them.